Okay, this is a relationship teaching, and the title, since we had to get a title, is Don't Cover the Roots. Don't cover the roots. Now, those of you that know me, I like to get at the root of the matter. If you get to the root of a thing, you can discover you can find out why the whole situation is going on. James chapter 1, it says, what causes fights and quarrels among you? Don't they come from the desires that battle within you? What causes fights and quarrels among you, outside of you? Don't they come from the desires that battle within you? That word desire there, or in other translations they use the word lust, it means pleasures. And it's again, that's in verse 1, and in verse 3, I'll read that in a minute, it uses the same word. So in verse 1 and verse 3, it uses the word pleasures, which is actually the Greek word hedon, where we get hedonism. Pleasures. So, and the root of that word that we translate pleasures just means to please. So, what causes fights and quarrels among you? Don't they come from the desire to please or pleasures within you? So one of the first things I wanted to do was ask you, just rhetorically to get it out in the open, what are some desires? Not talking about the battle aspect, just what are some desires? And I wrote down a few, and I'll throw those out first. One of the first ones I wrote down was sexual. That's a desire. That's a pleasure. Coffee, that's an object of desire. A big category, a general category would be emotional, that desire area. Two of the other ones that I wrote down, and then I'll ask you guys to throw out any other ones you think of, is comfort. That's a big thing we like to be pleased in. We want to be comfortable. And one of the things the Lord spoke to me right as I wrote down comfort was that we're only supposed to operate truly in true comfort in His presence, in relationship with Him. That's why the Holy Spirit is called the Comforter. So when we choose to find comfort in other areas, we're actually setting ourselves up for disappointment and excluding ourselves from relationship. The last one that I wrote down was security. And I like the quote, I've always liked the quote from Ben Franklin. He said, those who would give up essential liberty to purchase a little temporary safety deserve neither liberty nor safety. Now that's the exact quote. I've heard some variations on that, that those who choose to give up freedom for security deserve and get neither. The point is, there's a lot of things we try to find security in, a solid place in. And what we end up doing is surrendering ourselves to those things. And they cause us problems. So back to James. What causes fights and quarrels among you? Don't they come from the desires that battle within you? You want something, but you can't have it. You kill and you covet, but you don't get what you want. That's what it's talking about. In this teaching on relationship today, I'm focused on the roots. What is at the root of what battles within you? Verse 2 here in James chapter 4, it says, you want something, but you do not get it. You kill, you covet, you cannot have what you want. You quarrel and fight, and you do not have because you do not ask God. That's the key. If we would go to the Lord and ask Him for the stuff that we want, the pleasures, because He works out everything for our good and for our good pleasure. Do you realize that? Pleasures aren't bad. When we read this, I want you to understand first and foremost, when we read this and it says, what causes fights and quarrels among you? Don't it come from the desires that battle within you? We automatically go, desires are bad. No. Desires seeking the wrong fulfillment or source of satisfaction is where it's wrong. Case in point, someone who sleeps with a whole bunch of people sexually is generally not a happy person. They may put a smile on their face, but somebody in a committed relationship, that's a correct relationship, marriage, they can be fulfilled. Same physical act, but one brings fulfillment and the other doesn't. And I've heard the horror stories of people who slept with multiple people and then they say, you know, I feel so empty, I can't make a connection with people. And if you do an actual study on that, that was one of the psychological things that's happened in this world is the desire to... The free love movement, we don't realize was actually a psych warfare movement to get everybody to just sleep around with everybody, because they know that if you have multiple sexual partners before a certain age, that it will be very, very difficult for you to form a lasting bond with another person. And that's part of destroying the family unit. Side point. So it says in verse 3, when you ask, we're talking about asking God, and you don't ask God because, you know what, most of the time we don't ask God for the things that we want because we know deep down inside we shouldn't want that thing. And the things we do want, we still don't ask. What causes fights and quarrels? From the desires. Now automatically we think the desires are bad. It's not the desires are bad. It's that we're seeking satisfaction or fulfillment of those desires in the wrong places. Mostly that's what causes the fights and quarrels. The desires battle within us, and then we go, you're not giving me what I need. You're not taking care of this. I want this from you. Why are you doing this? Why are you doing that? Or we get into the other areas, that person's bothering me. This person offended me. This person didn't like that. Okay, that comes from within you. No matter what they're doing, if you have a problem with it, if you can't overlook that, who's got the problem? Interesting, isn't it? Okay, so verse 3 again. When you ask, you do not receive because you ask with the wrong motives, that you may spend what you get on your pleasures. That word pleasures is the same word translated desires in the beginning. They both could be translated lusts, but we don't understand lusts. We understand that as a negative, which in a lot of places it is, but we don't understand necessarily pleasures. So let's keep it in the area of desires because that's generally a word we can understand, the word desires or desire. And if we use that in both spots, what causes fights and quarrels? Don't they come from the desires that battle within you? And then you get down, when you ask with the wrong motive, the wrong heart attitude that you may spend it on your desires. You know, the most fulfilling thing is to give to somebody else. It's more of a blessing to give than it is to receive. In fact, it's in the giving that people receive. It's amazing. You'll see an athlete who's been doing their own thing and they're high on a pedestal, and then a situation occurs in their life and they're put in a situation where they need to give back to the community or whatever it is, and they sit down with a little kid that's going through some medical problem, some horrible medical problem, and they get really humbled and actually start getting fulfilled because they've given of themselves. Sometimes for the first time in their life, truly given of themselves. And then it becomes their passion. You know, most athletes and celebrities like that start up foundations aren't just doing it to make a name for themselves. They've already made a name for themselves. Most of them are just so moved by that experience of giving to somebody else, they say, I've got to do more. I titled this because my wife asked, don't cover the roots. And I'm going to teach you a little bit about, we had to look up the word, arborism. Or arboriculture. Arboriculture. An arborist, someone who takes care of trees. So I looked up a little bit of arborist just to clarify, to make sure I was on the right page. I've studied quite a bit on it, meditated on it, but I was just wanting to make sure. Did anybody think of any of the other desires?
To control my own time.
Control your own time. And would that fit in that category? What causes the fights and quarrels outside of you? Your desire to control your own time, and then you get down and you don't ask God to help you control your own time because you want to spend it on your own time, not what He wants to spend it on, which would be ultimately more fulfilling, but it's...
Yes.
Anybody else?
Peace in families.
The peace in your family. Most of the time, let's look at that one. Most of the time that we want peace in our family just because we want everything to be just calm down. A lot of times we're just like, you know what, I just want some peace and quiet. Would you knock it off? And the reality is that's not the peace that we actually need. The peace we need flows from inside no matter what storm's going on the outside. But what causes the fights and quarrels? Focused on this today. Now, Anybody else? Any other things? Anybody else? Joy, you want joy? See, that's a good one. But if we're just making merry, if we're just going around being happy, Solomon talked about that, where he said, you know, if all I'm doing is just doing things, you can read about it in Ecclesiastes and Proverbs. He said, if I'm just doing stuff to make myself happy and not walking in fulfillment, ultimately I'll end up miserable after the joy has passed. I'm paraphrasing. I can't think of the actual quote off the top of my head right now. But you get the point. There are desires within us. They're good if we're seeking the right fulfillment. They're destructive if we're not. Now, why don't we cover the roots? If you would study a little bit about trees, and I just looked it up. I said, I know this, so I punched in the question this way. Can covering the roots of a tree kill it? Now, I already know the answer, but I wanted to see all the questions. If I'd have said, is covering the roots of a tree bad? I'd have got a bigger list of more ambiguous stuff. I know from what I've studied that if you cover the roots of a tree, you will kill it. Now, some of the things that popped up when I did this little search was roots that are exposed. You ever seen the roots that stick up above the ground? But if you study anything about arborism or arboriculture, you would find out that putting a layer of dirt around the base of a tree and even up a little bit on the trunk can kill it. It'll kill the tree. It causes it to suffocate. Now, this brought up a bunch of things about roots that are exposed. And the person asking the question said, hey, I got all these roots from my maple tree that are sticking up above the ground. They've grown up above the ground. Is there anything I can do? There's no grass that'll grow. You can't mow it back there with the grass that does grow. And it looks hideous because it didn't get taken care of. And one of the persons answered back and said, first of all, the roots didn't grow up. The ground has settled. And in fact, maple trees are extremely thirsty trees and extremely destructive to the soil if they're not replenished. Meaning they'll compact that soil around there by absorbing the nutrients and the water out of it. And they'll compete with the grass for the nutrients. So a little bit of technical stuff there. The point is, she said, okay, so what's the issue? What can I do about the trees? And they said, you can't cover the roots. Your ultimate best bet would be to pull the tree and plant new grass if you want fancy grass there. A long-term goal would be to put a thin 1 to 2 inch layer of compost over that area and then a thin layer of mulch over that and let it compost down. So you're talking a long time to build that soil back up. Mm-hmm. The point here today is that I want you to realize that if you cover the roots of a tree or the lower part of a tree, you will literally suffocate the tree and kill it. Why is that important? Because there are roots in your life that God's trying to expose so that He can get the nutrients and the water that you need. And we keep trying to cover them up with pretty grass. And we're killing our own tree. We're killing ourselves by covering them up. God keeps putting us in situations that tests us, that pushes us, that forces us to deal with things that we don't want to deal with. We just want to get some nice new grass and cover up the roots. The desires within us are battling within us. And instead of dealing with those desires within us, we'd rather just win the fight and the quarrel that we're having with somebody else. What causes fights and quarrels among you? Don't they come from the desires that battle within you? And what we choose to do as people is, instead of dealing with the desires that battle within us, getting them in the right heart motive, taking them before the Lord, figuring out which ones are right, which ones are wrong, we would instead rather win the argument. We'd rather win the fight and the quarrel with somebody else when the problem lies within us. And God keeps putting us in situations that the roots are exposed. Now let me ask you this question. I can read you some of the answers here. But literally, if you cover the roots, what happens is the roots are not allowed to breathe. I didn't know this until I read this one today. But roots actually pull in a lot of oxygen. Not just the leaves. The roots pull in a lot of oxygen from the soil. I didn't realize that. It's okay. So the root's pulling a lot of oxygen. So if you cover up the tree, the floor, the ground of the tree where the roots are, or if you just took a regular tree where the roots weren't sticking up, but you wanted to put a layer of dirt around there and do some different landscaping or something like that. There's actually, I have an arborist book in the house that talks about how you have to actually put a retaining wall around it to keep the dirt so far away from the tree so that it doesn't kill the tree. And then if you want to landscape up to that wall that you have there, but you can't landscape right up to the tree trunk, because you kill it. And I thought, okay, so this is new, that the tree roots need oxygen, and they grow at a certain level, and they're accustomed to that, as well as they need the water and the minerals that they're pulling up from the ground, but they need that oxygen. So my question on that is, how many of you feel suffocated? I don't want to show of hands, but just think within yourself. How many of you feel suffocated within your life? And how many of you look and go, well, it's that person. It's this thing. It's, if I just had this thing fixed over here, that thing fixed over there, if I just took care of this, if I just had this thing satisfied, if I just had that thing satisfied, then I wouldn't feel like I'm suffocating. When the reality is, we're trying to cover up the roots that God's trying to expose and get oxygen and nutrients and life-giving water to. Don't cover the roots. God's trying to expose the roots so that we get at what's real, so that we deal with what we need to deal with, so we stop avoiding the things in our life. Do you got fights and quarrels? They're coming from within you. I don't care who's around you. I've said it before and I'll keep saying it. I don't care. You can live at peace within yourself no matter what's going on around you. I've watched people. You can watch the newscasts. You've seen them. You watch somebody, they just went through a tornado, a hurricane, some natural disaster. And one person over here doesn't have peace and hope on the inside of them. And they're miserable, and you see it in their face that they're devastated, their life is over, they don't know what they're going to do. And somebody else that has hope and peace on the inside of them, they're like, you know what, we'll just rebuild. Thank God for that we weren't caught up in it. They just start saying all these things. You know, I've had somebody recently been saying to me, how can you turn everything into a positive? How can you keep looking at everything positive? How can you find the positive in every situation? Because I've got the positive within me. So it just flows. I just have to look that way at things. Because it's within me. And I've battled enough within myself. I've battled for years. I've had the fights. I've had the quarrels outside of me. From the battles that are within me, that are fighting within me. I'm like, you know what, I want that, I want that, I want whatever it is. The joy, the peace, the security, the comfort, wanting my own time, whatever it is. I've had all those. And they caused fights and quarrels. And for a while, I went to blame it on somebody else. It's because of them. It's because of them. It's because of them. But the reality is, when we put our head on our pillow at night and we finally lay down, we know deep down inside that it doesn't matter whether those people are around or not. We still got a fight and a conflict within us because we won't deal with it. How do you deal with it? There's tons of ways. And I could sit down with people individually and talk to you about, how do I deal with this? How do I deal with that? What I'm talking about is generality today. We all have roots. That's my endeavor on many things. Especially dealing with everybody individually. What's the root of what's going on in your life? What's the root of what you're dealing with? My focus as an apostle is foundations. I'm always looking at the foundation to build. And I go, okay, what's causing the fights and quarrels? Why? How can I keep this as general so I don't offend anybody, even though you'll recognize it? Why are certain people attracted to you? Why are certain people that look like they're the ones bringing the conflict and the problems and everything else in your life, why are they attracted to you? You ever met somebody that just goes and looks for a fight? they will find a fight. They'll find somebody to fight with. Somebody who just has whatever's inside of them is battling within them. They just want to punch somebody. They don't have to have any reason other than just that desire within them. Just they're angry. They're looking for a fight. They get up in the morning and they're looking to quarrel with somebody. Why? Because of the desires they won't deal with inside. And they're trying to cover up their roots with the nice pretty landscaping, and they're suffocating. And they point the finger at somebody else. You're my problem. No, I'm sorry. They're not. So what we need to understand about all this, the fights and quarrels, the desires that battle within you, is if you keep covering them up and you don't want to deal with them, then all of these desires are going to battle. One of the things the Lord said to me quite a while ago now, I just was sitting there one day and I said, what's the meaning of life? And many of you have heard me say this. I said, Lord, what's the meaning of life? And he said, immediately, he said, to know yourself. And I began to meditate on it. And of course, when the Lord said that to me, I immediately said, okay, to know myself, that also means I need to know you, because I can't truly know myself without knowing you. So I need to know myself. So the reality is that the reciprocate of that is if you don't know yourself, you find lack of purpose, lack of meaning in this life. And a lot of us are walking around with a lack of purpose and a lack of meaning because we don't know ourselves. And the reason we don't know ourselves is because we're covering up the roots and we don't want to see what's really going on. We don't want them to be exposed so that they can get the oxygen and the nutrients and the water that they need so that the rest of the tree can flourish. We want to cover them up and say, I don't want to deal with this root. I don't want to deal with this root. I'd rather point my finger at somebody else and not deal with this root. And not deal with this root. I don't want to deal with that. Don't make me look at that. And a lot of times we get into fights and quarrels with people because we're forced at that moment to look at maybe just a little bit of that root and see part of it. It's about what Pastor Ken reiterated earlier. It's about responsibility, the ability to respond. Responsibility, the ability to respond. There are fights and quarrels, there are things going on at different times in our lives, and can you truly assess and say, that's completely outside of me? No matter what that fight and quarrel is, I'm at peace within myself. Most of us can't. Most of us have to recognize and say, you know what? That person may have this problem and that problem, and they may have come to attack me, but I fed into it because there's stuff battling within me. Or maybe we look to do it. I know there are people that look to have conflicts in their life because they've grown up in a conflicted environment and they're actually more comfortable fighting and arguing than they are stepping into peace. I'll read to you a little bit out of Jude. Jude's just a little small book. Jude, verse 3, Jude says, Dear friends, although I was eager to write to you about the salvation we share, I felt I had to write and urge you to contend for the faith that was once for all entrusted to the saints. For certain men whose condemnation was written about long ago have secretly slipped in among you. They're godless men who changed the grace of our God into a license for immorality and deny Jesus Christ, our only sovereign and Lord. I looked up that word. They translate the phrase license for immorality, and I looked it up. It's actually translated lasciviousness in the King James, and it literally means unbridled lust, excess, licentiousness, wantonness, outrageousness, shamelessness, insolence. I like the first one because it says an unbridled lust. Now, it says there's men who secretly slipped in among you. They're godless men, changed the grace of our God into unbridled lust. They deny Jesus Christ, our only sovereign and Lord. What's significant about denying Jesus Christ? Because when you deny Christ, you are refusing to recognize the flesh of God in proper operation and position. Now, the interesting thing about that is, I want to read you another one talking about these men. And in verse 10, it says, These men speak abusively against whatsoever things they do not understand. You ever met anybody like that? They just don't like something because they don't like it. They don't understand why. They don't know the reason why. They just got to attack it because they don't like it. Well, I don't like that. Why? I don't know. Well, maybe you ought to find out before you just go and attack it. Then it says, and what things they do understand by instinct, like unreasoning animals, these are the very things that destroy them. Now, I looked up the word instinct just out of curiosity there. And it actually means natural. What things they understand by the natural. And the word, the definition of the word, part of the definition is, it says by aid of the bodily functions. Or bodily senses, not bodily functions. Bodily senses. By aid of bodily senses. So, they attack the things they don't understand, and then the things that they think they understand by their five senses input, those are the things that destroy them. If we're going to be happy, productive people, if we're going to be fulfilled, if we're going to walk in purpose, at some point we got to start dealing with the stuff inside. And we can't be like these people operating in unbridled lust, uncontrolled desires. We're letting them battle within us. We don't get what we want. We kill and covet, and we run around fighting with everybody. We don't take it to God because we know our heart's not right about it. We keep it to ourselves. And then we fight with the other stuff on the outside of us. Well, it's that person, it's this person, it's that person. And then just like this, they speak abusively against whatsoever things they do not understand, and what things they do understand by the five senses, those are the things that are destroying them. Now here's some of the meat that I was telling you I was going to get into. Of course, that's quite a bit of meat. But here's some other things I was going to get into. When I asked about the desires, I got a little bit of a list. If you would begin to understand and investigate the desires within you, you'll begin to diffuse the battles within you. One of the things that I have taught different individual people at different times is understanding your own sexual desires. If you understand, and I can say it however I say it, your sexual impulses, whatever, you understand what I'm saying. If you would begin to understand and deal with the cycle of sexual desire within you, you could control it better. Not be an unbridled lust. But the most interesting thing is that if you would understand that cycle within yourself, particularly that natural sexual desire within yourself and the cycle of it, you'll understand why some days you don't want to pray and some days you do. If you would start to observe what's going on in your flesh, the conflicts that are going on, the battles that are going on, and begin to move it over into the proper place, you would understand so much more about yourself. Why do you do the things? Why when you're sitting there all at peace, calm, is there all of a sudden something rises up within you and you feel agitated all of a sudden? Don't you think that's something we ought to deal with? You were just fine, and then all of a sudden, you're just agitated. And you want to go, I'm going to go talk to that person. They really bothered me the other day. What causes fights and quarrels among you? They come from the desires that battle within you. What is it for comfort? We're looking for comfort in all these other fleshly things. See, if I recognize in my flesh, you know what, I just want to be comfortable right now. That's when I should stop and go, wait a minute. I'm supposed to find my comfort in you, Lord. Comfort in your arms, comfort in your presence. Why are these negative people attracted to me? Here's a big thing. And I was talking with a few of you the other day, and I mentioned this. And the Lord's been talking to me about this for about 4, 5, 6 months now. But the Lord said that the majority of the women here, and the men as well, but he was really focused on the women because that's a big thing, is you don't feel attractive. And let me take this point and explain to you how this battle happens. The desires that battle within you and causes fights and quarrels among you. I know this is happening. The Lord's had me praying about it, and I thought about sitting down with the women and kind of doing it, just sitting down and saying, all right, let's get this out. Let's deal with this. Let's get some things going on. So I'll just start from the hypothetical. Or not from the hypothetical, but just from a neutral position. You're not attractive, or you don't feel attractive, okay? You send out a vibe when you do that. They call it a vibe. You're broadcasting, you're transmitting that you don't feel attractive. And then what we do in that place of not feeling attractive is we want somebody else to overcome what we're putting out. We're broadcasting we don't feel attractive, and then we come up, you've seen it, they even do funny commercials on it. The woman goes up, she stands in front of the mirror, she looks at the dress, and she goes, with all that battle within her, she's like, I don't like myself, I don't like the look, I don't like the way this looks, I think this makes me look heavy, whatever, makes me look fat, whatever, like that. And then she turns to her husband and puts him on the spot and goes, does this make me look fat? And he goes, oh no. How do I answer that without a fight and a quarrel?
Really?
That's a bear trap for him to put his leg into, right there. And he goes, now where did the question come from? It didn't come from his opinion of her. It came from her. She's not satisfied within herself. She doesn't feel comfortable within herself. So she wants to project it onto somebody else, because if she can fight with him, she don't have to deal with her own battle. If he said, yeah, you kind of look heavy in that, she'd go, you think so? You think just all that burden that she has within her is unleashed on him now, instead of her dealing with her own self-image. And so when I was sharing this with some other people, one of the things I said was, you know what? There are things I'd like to change, little things I would like to work on physically. But above all, I'm attracted to myself. You go, well, that sounds kind of funny. Well, then you have a perverted understanding of what attractive means. It means I like me. I love me. I like to wear the clothes I like to wear. We went to Myers. I do this all the time. We went to Myers the other day. I was in my work clothes. I went in the closet. It takes me less than 5 minutes. 3 minutes. I changed my clothes, put my rings on. We were going to Myers. We were in Myers for maybe 20 minutes. But I like to wear my clothes. I don't care if anybody else sees me like this. I like to look in the mirror and go, look good, boy. You know why? Because I like me. I love me. Part of the fights and quarrels that happen around is because you don't like yourself. You're not attracted to yourself. And then you think other people aren't attracted to you. And then you send out that vibe. And then you get around a bunch of people and they're not. They're just as negative. And they're not attracted to themselves. And what happens in that cycle is they automatically reject you because you're sending out vibes of rejection. I'm no good. Why would you want to be with me anyways? I got this problem. I got that problem. Why would you want to be around me? I must be this and I must be that. And we go down this whole list of why we're so horrible. And then somebody goes, yeah, you're pretty messed up. And you go, seriously, you're going to talk to me like that? You just went down the list of what you don't like about yourself. And then I responded to, yeah, I see that. And now you're going to hate on me. What causes fights and quarrels among us? They come from the desires of battle within us. We want to cover up the root. One of the phrases I like to hear in this thing is, it said, one of the answers, it says, trees will die if you put, and it uses a specific word, it says, if you put heavy things over top the roots, such as soil or sod. You know, the rolls of sod that they put out, or just straight soil. Now, would anybody think that just putting soil or sod would be a heavy thing? You'd think that's just the natural stuff that needs to go around a tree, right? But where the tree's at, where are you at right now? You're a tree. Where are you at right now? Are your roots exposed? They getting chopped on by the mower every time it goes by? You're getting kicked on? You ever walk by the trees that have the roots exposed for long times and they're rubbed bare? It's time to stop covering that stuff up and start dealing with it. It's time to stop pointing a finger at other people and start going, I got to work on me. I can't walk around feeling condemned and expect somebody else to overcome what I'm dealing with. I've heard this phrase from so many people for my entire life. Even directed at me, but a lot of times I've heard it from other people. They just don't make me happy. How many people have heard somebody or said it to somebody, you know what, you need to do whatever you need to do to make me happy. Mm-hmm. Okay, when that statement comes out, what you have to make several assumptions. Number one, you're not happy. If you're saying to somebody else, you need to make me happy, then the assumption easily is, you're not a happy person already. Then the second easy assumption is, you don't want to deal with it, you want somebody else to overcome what you won't deal with. And I'm sorry if that steps on a few toes, but that's a lot of us. We don't want to deal with our own issues. We want to make somebody else deal with it. When they fail, we beat them up like you wouldn't believe. We get out our emotional hammer and we get out the emotional baseball bat and just go after them. Why aren't you doing this for me and that for me and this for me and that for me? It's all about these desires that battle within us. If you would understand them, you would understand what's going on. There are times that I don't want to pray. And I recognize there's a cycle in my life. About every 3 days, naturally, just naturally without any interruptions, things like that. About every 3 days, I have the real desire to pray. Just naturally. Okay, Lord, I want to be intimate with you. It's a correlation, okay, with the sexual desire. It's a parallel. Your flesh is literally reflecting what's going on in your soul. So I have this desire about every 3 days to really pray. Other than that, it's a struggle those 2 other days because I don't really have the desire to be intimate like that. Other people, whatever your cycle is, figure it out. That'll help you understand. You know what? You can go into it and go, Lord, you know what today? I really don't have the desire, but I need to be in here, so I'm going to be in here. Because you know what? If I go to that 3rd day and I go, you know what? I wasn't in the mood the other 2 days and I really kind of want to be in here, but you know what? I've already pushed it off, so I'm going to push it off again. And then pretty soon I'm building up a resistance. You ever done that? I could get into so many deep things about all this stuff because I've watched couples where they won't be intimate with each other. And yet one of their gripes and arguments and fights is that they are not intimate with each other. They fight with each other because they won't be intimate with each other, and then they won't be intimate. I go, all right, what do you want me to do? How do I counsel you on that? You're yelling at each other about what you need from each other, supposedly need from each other, and then when it comes down to it, you won't take it. Awful quiet in here. A lot of root covering up, maybe. We've been covering the roots for too long. The Lord's trying to expose them. You know, He puts you smack dab in the middle of a situation and go, deal with this. And you go, no, it's his fault. No, it's her fault. It's not my problem. Quit covering up your roots. The geraniums and the hostas and the daffodils aren't going to take care of the problem. Oh, but they look so pretty around the base of the tree. They do. But if you haven't dealt with the root, they're going to kill the tree. And then what you'll have is really nice flowers around a dead tree. How's that going to look?
I'm the tree?
You're the tree. We're all the trees. It came up with maples in my search, but I like where they're oaks of righteousness. That's where we're supposed to be. It takes a long time to grow, a long time to develop, but it's some of the hardest, most desired wood out there. Strong, straight oak trees. That's what the Lord called us, oaks of righteousness. He didn't call us poplars. Huh? What are the little trees that grow around the house, man? I chop them down and they grow back they are a weed. They're a softwood weed is what they are. That's what they are. They grow, I mean, chop it all down like there's a little stump, and then that stump just blows up. Amazing. When we're looking at all of this stuff, I want my desire for the people around me, the people that the Lord puts in my life, is to encourage them, to teach them, to help them get to a place of a solid foundation and deal with the roots that are in their life. The desires that battle within you are demonstrating, are showing you roots. And instead of, take a step back and look at your life and go, look at the last fight you've had with somebody. And assess what was going on within you at that moment. What causes fights and quarrels? Is that true, or is James wrong? Was James teaching something that was truth, or was he just throwing it out there just because he was bored? What causes fights and quarrels among you? They come from the desires that battle within you. Even if I didn't read it from James, I could explain it. You get all wound up inside and you want to fight with somebody instead of dealing with what's in you. You're sending out vibes. Vibes of rejection, vibes of anxiety, vibes of fear. And guess what happens? People reject you. You get into situations where you're anxious and fearful. And you go, why am I so anxious and fearful? Because you're sending out vibes. You're sending out that information. You're attracting it to you. I don't feel very attractive. And then you get in a situation that reinforces and compounds what you're already feeling. And then the way we try to deal with it as people is, instead of dealing with it ourselves and forcing it, I'll throw this out, I'll close my eyes and throw this out rhetorically. How many of you can look in the mirror, look at your eyes in the mirror, and honestly say to yourself, I love you? For a lot of people, it's very difficult. You may be able to do a glance, but you know what? When you're looking in the mirror, the windows of your soul, a lot of times we see all that baggage and all that garbage that we don't want to deal with. And we take a quick glance in the mirror and we look back and go, you know what? I'd rather put some sod here. I'd rather cover this up with some other stuff. The only thing that is recommended to cover up that tree with, other than tearing the tree out, which we're not going to do, the only other thing is some mulch and some compost. Compost is decaying matter that has rich nutrients in it. So we need to get that rich nutrient around us. Another thing that was interesting to me that I didn't understand or didn't realize until this point was that part of the problem of covering up tree roots with soil is that it'll actually retain more moisture. And if you put soil too much up on the trunk, at the base of the trunk of the tree, and it retains too much moisture, it'll rot that wood and kill the tree. The parallel is, if we have too much moisture on the outside that's not able to penetrate, and something's holding it in place so it's not able to penetrate, and we don't get the moisture up into the tree where it needs to be, but it's on the outside rotting it, it'll kill the tree. And what's the parallel? I've met so many people that like to go to this meeting and that meeting, and they bounce all around the place, and they're going to go, oh, so-and-so's in town. We're going to go down to that church meeting and have a really good time. And what they're doing is they're getting all of this water on the outside, and it's being retained. And the wood's literally rotting at the base. Because they're covering up what they shouldn't be covering up. It needs to be exposed. I come up here on a regular basis. I often lament and go, Lord, you know what? I don't deal with a lot of stuff anymore as far as within me. I've learned to overcome that stuff, and I try to impart that wisdom to you. But there's sometimes where I lament and I go, I haven't dealt with anything this week, Lord. How do I draw a parallel or an example? And so what I end up doing is having to close my eyes and not look at anybody and draw an example from what I know everybody here is dealing with. And then I go, I'm not trying to point a finger. I'm not trying to pick on you. I don't call out names and stuff like that. But I'm saying, look, I'm trying to tell you, you can get into a position where you don't battle and fight with the desires within you and then cause all the conflict on the outside of you. You got conflict around you? At some point, you're responsible. and you're able to respond. And if you keep covering it up, keep causing problems for yourself, you're going to die. Whatsoever things they do not understand, they attack. But when things they think they understand, by their five senses, these are the things that actually destroy them. Wouldn't you think by the five senses that if you have a tree with exposed roots, you just go out there and cover it up with some dirt, do some nice landscaping, and it'd be great? Look good, wouldn't it? Hey, I got some roots exposed. I'm just going to do some landscaping. I'm going to cover this up, make it look nice. I even know people that put planter boxes around their trees. And they put it too thick. And then years later, it may take a while, but years later the tree dies. And you go, I don't understand. It must have got a disease, must have had something else. No, it could have been simple as it didn't. You can't put the dirt up on it like that. It covers the roots so they can't breathe, get the water and nutrients they need. It puts too much moisture at the base of the trunk so it rots. And the tree literally suffocates and drowns. I know a lot of you at different points feel like you're suffocating and drowning within your own life. And I want you to start taking a look. I'm encouraging you. Start taking a look at the desires that are battling within you. Your problem is not other people. It's not. You can get you think Jesus was all wound up and frustrated that people wouldn't listen to him? Well, yeah, it says in such and such passage. Okay, do you believe that Jesus got into sin and missed the mark of faith, let his desires rule his life? Then why do we? Because we haven't learned yet. It's easier. It's easier. Do you understand that? We all do it. It's easier to avoid our own problems and fight and quarrel and argue with somebody else. And the root of it is our desires. And the deeper root of that is we don't know ourselves. And if you don't know yourself, then you don't know meaning and purpose. But you can. You can know yourself, but it's a process. Do you want to be a little sapling, little junk tree that nobody wants around? Or be an oak? It takes a long time to grow, but produces the best wood. You understand that? Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. As long as you keep shifting the blame and responsibility off to somebody else and keep fighting and quarreling, you're not going to be happy. You're not going to be fulfilled. And so many people are waiting around for somebody else. Well, if I just meet that right person, then all this, like-minded person, somebody who gets me. You don't get you. Come on. Be honest. There are things about you you don't like. And instead of working on them, you'd rather fight with somebody else. Well, you don't make me happy. Sorry, there's nobody that can make anybody else happy outside of them. You have to make a decision to be happy within yourself. And then you know what? Then you'll attract the right people to you that will add to your happiness. Instead of trying to get somebody around you that'll overcome your own misery. Or doing so many activities that you avoid dealing with it. One of the things about Moses, he said, it's written about him in Hebrews, and it says he chose not to enjoy the pleasures of Egypt for a short time. Chose that suffering for the kingdom would be better. He had a choice to make. Do I stay in Egypt and enjoy the pleasures of being a prince of Egypt? Or do I suffer for a while and walk in ultimate fulfillment? Most of us, especially in Western culture, are looking for temporal satisfaction. We're looking for a temporary fix. What is it? We got roots God's trying to expose so that we'll deal with them. And we'd rather go around and plant some some annuals. Go get a flat of flowers and plant it around there and make it look better. And we won't want to deal with it. It's a very uplifting message today, isn't it? See, everybody's happy and excited and ecstatic. I could have come out and just say, hey, it's their problem. You are just perfect the way you are. It's all them. They just don't get it. They're just all messed up, and you know what? It's that person's fault. It's not my fault. What you guys got?
It really struck me when you said, when you correlated the tree with the roots, and it took me back to when the Lord shared with me that the phrase, all of you and none of me, isn't something that he put out there. It's something that we came up with, and it's not godly, because everything that we are, everything that's in us, is what's supposed to be there. It's just twisted wrong.
Right.
And the fact that dumping all that stuff on causes the roots to suffocate and be out of breath, lack breath. It took me back to the food and faith teaching that I did, that one of the diseases that lack of relationship is a neurological disease that keeps your veins from getting the oxygen they need. Mm-hmm. And it's literally one of the symptoms of it was breathlessness, a lack of breath.
Right.
And the Lord correlated that with me and said, the lack of breath is lack of relationship, lack of fellowshipping back and forth and hearing my voice. And it struck me that most people that talk about roots mm-hmm. and desires, they talk about getting them out of your life. Curse it at the roots, kill the roots, pull it up at the roots. And it's actually, the root is actually necessary. It's just not getting enough breath. It's not getting enough relationship mm-hmm. to function the way it's supposed to function.
Exactly. Look at it this way. You have a root in your life of, do we keep it general, a root of pain. Something happened to you in your childhood that caused you a lot of emotional pain. We want to cover it up. We want to either point the finger at somebody else or cover it up, and then when we do deal with it, we want to chop it out and uproot it. When the reality is God wants to give nutrients mm-hmm. and water and oxygen to that root, untwist it, because there's 15,000 people he's ready to unleash and send in your direction one by one who've gone through the same pain and heartache, and you understand how to overcome it. So instead of chopping out that root, he wants to feed and nourish it so it becomes a strength to you rather than an impediment.
My weakness has become my strength.
Exactly. My weakness becomes my strength. Why? Because the Lord's pouring on the water, the nutrients, the oxygen. We're breathing properly. And then we actually help somebody else. Peshkin?